Hello everyone, I am Ann Alta. I adopted Jack, he was my service dog. This is our story. Welcome. I am a visual artist, mostly working in painting, sometimes sculpture. I work in the visionary art space. A lot of my stuff has been described as sci-fi or imaginative realism. I like to think of it as more than real. My series of paintings that I work on now are based on my story about Jack the Spacedog and Aeon's adventures in space. We're gonna let you into the studio and see what it's like to run a professional art studio and be a working artist. This is my opportunity to let you into my world more than just seeing my paintings. This is my project, Jack the Spacedog. I was asked to talk a little bit about how the Jack the Spacedog project came about. So I'm going to do a lot of repetitive painting here today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Jack the Spacedog, you can see Ann Alta and Jack in most of my most recent paintings. It's an adventure about Aeon and his German Shepherd, Jack the Spacedog, and their attempts to save existence itself, which sounds like a big goal, and it is. It's really a metaphor for how my German Shepherd, Jack, saved my life. I adopted Jack when he was 11 years old, so he was already a very old dog. He was my service dog and he lived to be 15. While he was very old, it was easy to forget how old he was because you just never could tell other than the gray around his muzzle. One Saturday morning, he got up from behind the couch and he was a little wobbly. I honestly thought he laid down on his leg funny and it fell asleep. So I took him outside to get him to walk around a bit, and normally he would run to the front door and run outside and jump off the retaining wall, which is what he had just done that morning. And instead he walked outside really slowly and he just sat down in the front yard. That was pretty unusual. I thought maybe he was just tired, so I tried to get him to walk back inside. He got about halfway and laid down, and I had to carry him back into his bed. The symptoms that we told to our good friend who was a vet, she said, you can take him to the hospital, but he's had a heart attack. There's just nothing to do for him. And so about an hour or two later, Jack was gone. I don't think everybody will understand, but some people will understand. Losing a furry family member like that when they've not just been really close, but also made a big change in your life, and I needed a lot of change at the time. Jack really was a best friend and a loved family member in so many ways. For months after he was gone, Jack was locally famous because he was so friendly and he went with me a lot of places. Everybody knew Jack, and so everybody asked about him, and it was still really raw for me and still really hard. I would start to say his name and it would just catch in my throat. Even now, it's been 2 years. I can talk about it, but it is very hard. For months, I struggled with it. I'd come home at night. My husband and I would be making dinner. He was usually trying to lay at our feet, looking for anything that might transition from the counter to the floor, transition food. He wouldn't be there and we would just cry. I'd dream about him at night. I couldn't sleep a lot. I would wake up in the night and something would remind me of him and I'd cry. My husband would get up at night and walk by the bed, and normally Jack would be there, and his habit was to reach down and scratch his ears, and he would do that and he wouldn't be there. So one night I couldn't sleep, or I was having trouble sleeping. I finally fell asleep and I had a dream, and in the dream I was floating in the void of space. There were stars everywhere. It was as though I was just floating out there like a satellite. Off in the distance I could see a little light moving towards me. The light got bigger and bigger and it flew past me so fast, and the light looked much like the group of rings, 3 rings making a sphere that you can see featured in several of my paintings. But it went flying by me, and right behind it, like he was chasing it like it was a game, was a very cartoony version of Jack. He was flying by it in space with his tongue hanging out like a big dog smile. He looked at me as he went past. It felt like him. When I woke up, all of a sudden it's not like I just had that experience and it gave me the idea for Jack the Spacedog. When I woke up, the whole story was just in my head. The whole thing was there. Like I had read a 16-book novel, remembered all of it. It was just all already there. All the information, all the stories, all the characters, the plot, the story arc, everything. And it felt like, while Jack gave me so many gifts in his lifetime, it felt like his last parting gift. I was trying to find a way to still feel like I had Jack around, even though I knew he was gone. And also, I was having a lot of trouble helping other people understand why it was so difficult. What Jack meant to me and the way that he changed my life. The story, is a story of he and I, but set in a mix of fantasy sci-fi world, which is, usually a lot of my influence. I watch a lot of anime. I read a lot of sci-fi fantasy books. It felt like an opportunity. It was the story and it was the answer for other people to know Jack, to eventually come to love Jack the way that I did, and then understand or what it was to lose Jack. Not because I just want everybody to feel my pain. That's not the idea, but I just want people to be able to understand. So it's for me, and it's an interesting story. But it changed the whole arc of my painting. I was stuck. I hadn't painted for months even before he died. I was stuck on a painting because while I had developed this plus ultra style, this look and feel, I didn't know what it was about, other than I knew that the look was correct. But I had no idea what it was supposed to be about, so I go to do a painting, and I was just adding elements in that seemed cool, but they didn't have any purpose. There was no purpose behind it, and therefore it's hard to know what needs to be added or what needs to not be in there, because I don't know what it's about. At least for me, the story is important for every painting. His last parting gift was, I think at least, to save my art career, because I was at a standstill. I couldn't finish paintings even before he passed. This is our story, and it's, I'm using the medium of sci-fi and fantasy because the real reason people love Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, the fantasy world is one thing, and it's interesting and it's fun, but the thing people really get hooked by, and the thing that really makes one fantasy movie cheesy and another epic and poignant, is the story. It's the characters, it's their relationships, it's the aspect of a group of people thrown together that individually don't have the power to make change, but together somehow are more than who they would be individually. They have more power, they have more ability, they're able to push through things they couldn't by themselves. That was a relationship I had with Jack. I was more because of him than I was without. I was able to do more, I was able to be more, I was a better person. He reminded me that this is a wonderful life and a beautiful world. I thought that is the thing that makes stories compelling. And his story is a compelling story. Our story is an important story to me. So if everybody else enjoys it too, that's just a bonus, because I'm going to paint this either way. I don't think anybody's ever challenged the validity of whether or not I dreamed this story. I mean, I guess some people might wonder. I've never had anybody ask me. For my part, I think if you sit with me, as some clients and buyers have when they were looking at some of my paintings, if you sit with me for an hour as I tell the story, as I do when we do like a painting reveal or something like that, I don't think there's a lot of room to question, though. For my part, I don't really care whether or not people believe that I woke up with the whole story in my head. I mean, my husband got to experience it firsthand for good or ill. I woke him up at probably about 4 a.m. I think he got up to pee. I stopped him and started rambling about the whole story, and I made him sit there and listen for several hours while I relayed as best I could. It was, when you have everything, with the whole concept of the thing, it's like if someone asked you to tell me the history of China, where do you start? Right? You have all of it, and it's so much. So I did my very best to not sound like a rambling crazy person, but it was 4 a.m. and I did have volumes and volumes of information in my head all of a sudden. So he will tell you, absolutely, he woke up with just an unbelievable amount of information in his mind, and definitely a fleshed out story, so much so that he tripped over himself trying to get it all out at the same time. So I don't care if you believe it or not. This bumblebee civilization did not come first. The civilization that came first is the planet that we get stranded on later, but that's jumping ahead. So Aeon, his story starts with him getting into a lot of trouble. If any of you are Star Trek fans, there is a thing in the Star Trek ethos called the Prime Directive. Prime Directive says that no warp-capable civilization able to travel faster than light, can interfere with or reveal themselves to civilizations that have not achieved that. They make that the marker between advanced and pre-advanced civilizations, the ability to travel faster than light, the ability to get around the cosmos. So the Prime Directive is that you're not allowed to interfere. In my universe here, the same thing exists, though it's not a directive just for a federation of explorers. It is a directive for everyone, and it is not optional. And it's enforced by prison sentences and confinement and loss of property and that sort of thing. Well, Aeon's a bright guy. He is an artist then, and he also has an eye for what he thinks of as business opportunities. And an opportunity he sees is people, the reason they stopped letting people interfere with these civilizations is, one, they would change the arc of their development, and two, people tended to plunder them for resources because they're defenseless. They can't, a civilization like that can't hope to defend themselves against a spacefaring civilization. But Aeon thinks a lot of the anthropological goods, things like pottery made by a civilization no one's allowed to contact, trade goods, things like that, would be very valuable because it's a thing no one has. No one can go there. No one can have them. In the world of illicit art dealing, that's an infinitely valuable thing, something no one else can have. For people who've spent all their money on all the things that you can buy, the only thing that has value is something no one else can have. So Aeon, with the help of a friend, has designed a ship that is both small and inconspicuous, and he uses deep research into these civilizations from afar. He infiltrates the planets, and then he lives there for years, observing. Kind of like research, except his research is simply there to be able to assimilate into the civilizations with a sort of disguise suit that makes him look like he's of the same race. He uses a translator to speak and sound like them, and he learns their culture and their ways, and he uses the same trade goods that they do to trade with each other. He finds those same minerals on the planet or those same resources, and he trades for made goods by those civilizations. So this obviously is way out of bounds of what's allowed and legal, but he does this so that he can then, what he thinks of ethically, remove items from this planet that he has traded for in the same way that they trade with each other for, and then bring them back and sell them to the highest bidder. This works out really well for a long time. He goes fairly undetected all the way up until he doesn't. And while this is not illegal, while not every civilization considers this to be a serious infraction or a seriously illegal thing, it's really all about who catches you doing it. So he happens to get caught smuggling and importing these items off of the planet by the wrong group of people who take it very seriously and are very peeved about it. This results in Aeon being disappeared to a sort of gulag for several years. When he comes back, part of his trying to make a new life and trying to find out what he's supposed to do, since he's spent most of his time smuggling artifacts, he's a half self-trained anthropologist, biologist, scientist, but all of his skills are directed towards this one goal. He has to find things that he can do that are different, and this is along the line. This can be a very lonely pursuit, restarting a life. Jack is a dog that needs adoption. Jack couldn't live with his owner anymore, and he was just going to be given up sort of randomly. Aeon just loves him to death first time he meets him. Aeon happened to know the owner and find this out sort of just in time to say, no, that can just be, that's my dog. That's my dog. If you're not keeping him, I will. And he didn't even know how old Jack was until he adopted him. Even from the very beginning, Jack's age scared Aeon because he loved him a lot. He did his best to try to forget about it. For 5 long years, in the midst of all these adventures, it was fine. The Jack and Aeon story takes place in that 5 years that they had together. Even after Aeon has reformed his ways, he has an extensive map of uncharted areas or less charted areas of space because of his previous employment choices. So he is actually a space courier. So he's doing the same work, but now it's through remote areas that don't have warp gates. So nobody has warp engines, they have warp gates. So you go through a gate, the gate can only go to where another gate's built. That doesn't require any navigation. But if you want to go to areas that don't have a gate, you need somebody with a star map. The problem with star maps is stars are technically always moving, and when you're talking about light years difference, stars move in relative to each other and relative to where you are. So if you're positioned somewhere else than where the star map was made for, star map's useless. Unless you have actually traveled through those areas and recorded them as you went. And Aeon has a massive archive of these travels. He delivers everything from something some overprivileged mega tycoon wanted, all the way to sensitive data transfers that need to be done by hand and can't be done across the galactic net for security reasons. This is what Aeon does for a living. He's just a glorified space courier. He's good at his job. He has his own ship again. It's another ship that he and a friend of his made, and that ship is the ship that they were traveling in when Aeon first comes in contact with the bugs, the consumers. Everybody knows that they exist. Everybody knows that they're out there, but they're so far across the galaxy. It's one of those things like, yes, eventually they will consume the galaxy, but it's like that thing that nobody thinks about because it's in another solar system right now. It's around a different cluster of suns. It's not on this side of the... So it's hard for anybody to like really... I mean, everybody is concerned, but also it'll be 30 generations before they get to this section. Nobody really is ever able to like internalize it and make it a real present threat, except for the worlds that it's actively consuming. Well, Aeon never expects to run into them because, again, they're on that side of the galaxy. Well, in a delivery, he gets to have a first-hand run-in with them. And the thing to know about the bugs is that the bugs are aggressive. They consume everything. They consider anything that they're near to be their territory, and anything that gets near it to be a predator or an obstacle. Aeon comes up on their scans on a planet that he is not aware that they have already colonized because they're not supposed to be out that far, because people think that they are keeping track of where they are, and he begins to be chased. They're an ultra-advanced civilization, certainly much more advanced than his little, well-designed as it is, cobbled-together spaceship. He is being chased, and he built this spaceship with his buddy Victus. Victus is, to distill it down, an intelligent mushroom. Or a fungus-based humanoid. Kind of looks like a tall, skinny version of the dancing mushrooms in Disney's Fantasia. Except without, with normal eyes. The thing that his race of people are known for is technical savvy. And he is an exceptional example of technical savvy. He is an inventor, an engineer of things. So they are tired of using the warp gates. The warp gates are a significant drain on the ability to make money with this ship. And their thought is that they want to create a warp drive or a mobile warp gate that can go to a non-warp gate area, right? Something everybody says is impossible. Victus does not think it's impossible and has in fact built the engine, which is when they run into the reason why everybody says it's impossible, which is if you don't have a gate marked, a receiving gate, how do you have an address for where you're supposed to go? Is it integers? Is it based on stars? Well, all stars are always moving more than just around another star. They're moving around a central axis of the galaxy. That galaxy is moving around a different axis within the universe. Nobody has a map of existence, so they've never used the drive, but they do have it on the ship. How do you put an address system to all of existence? Thank you for watching. I'll have new episodes soon. If you're into sci-fi stories, I have a never-ending supply of them. You can also help others find these stories by sharing. My Instagram is aeonalta. My website is aeonalta.com. For now, adventure calls, and I must go.